This woman changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of children. In 1926, through one simple act, Clara Andrew pioneered the legalisation of adoption.
She had a drive that she was doing the right thing. Looking back, she was popularising something that was taking children away from their families.
Now, Clara Andrew's legacy is 100 years old. It's created families never thought possible.
I can't imagine being anybody else's parent, but is Elaine?
These kids are getting the love they need, and I just think it's good to have a provision that kids are all loved and looked after.
I wanted him to have a better life than what I could give him at the time.
But along the way, there have also been many victims.
We were not sluts, we were not prostitutes. Absolute cruelty.
It's quite clear from the records in my files. They said it's impossible to adopt a half-caste.
The shame is not yours. The shame is ours.
Today we are saying that we are profoundly sorry.
But is the system in the 21st century fit for purpose?
This process needs to be speeded up, but the process needs to be rigorous.
We have reached a point where we do not have enough adopters for the children who are waiting.
It is a system without which I would never have been adopted. I'm on a journey to learn about Clara Andrew's legacy.
I mean, we're absolutely stretched. We're dealing with crisis every day.
And what needs to change so that children can have a better future. This is where my story began. An orphanage in Russia in 1996. 6 months on, I was beginning a new life in London, adopted by my parents Robert and Gillian. But none of this life I have now would have been possible without the work of one woman, Clara Andrew. Born in 1862, Clara Andrew was to become one of the most significant pioneers of modern adoption. Inspired to help children after working with orphans and refugees in Exeter during the First World War. I've come to the National Archives in London to find out how Clara Andrew gained influence in British politics. From your understanding, Vanessa, what would have been happening to children prior to Clara Andrew coming along?
So there was a lot of separation of children from their families, so there were a large number of organisations that had residential care for children. So, for example, the Waifs and Strays Society of the Church of England, Barnardo's, or baby farming. So if a mother could not afford to keep her child, somebody may have taken a child for a payment, and there was a serious concern about baby farming. There were a lot of criminal cases in the 19th century and the early 20th century. That was one of Clara Andrew's selling points, if you like, was that she was going to stamp out baby farming.
What do these documents tell us about Clara Andrew?
We have quite a number of documents showing how she lobbied the Home Office and she gave evidence to the 1920 committee. One of the interesting documents in here is a brochure that she produced in around 1919 of this house Tower Cressy that she was given by Emmeline Pankhurst, and she ran a nursery out of there. And here we have quite an expensive glossy brochure, and then a description of what they're doing, and then a lot of interior shots of the children in the house with the nursery nurses.
I mean, this just proves how focused Clara Andrew was on this issue way before 1926.
Yes, she, I would say, pestered the government officials. Her initial approach, she said, let me be your adoption agent. She wanted to be the sole provider of adoption to the British government. She didn't succeed in that, but she was very influential in getting the laws passed and how adoption was framed legally, and that framework still exists today.
The legalisation of adoption was passed in England and Wales on the 4th of August 1926. From that moment on, rights could be legally transferred from birth parents to adoptive parents for the very first time.
Come on, come on, come on, come on.
One person who's benefited from Clara's work is broadcaster and presenter Nicky Campbell. Nicky was born in Edinburgh in 1961. He was adopted at just 4 days old by his parents Frank and Sheila Campbell.
What does the word adoption mean to you?
What does it mean to me? Over the years, it's sort of one I've tussled with in my mind and wondered about, and it's something that still to this day makes me feel, and I had the most wonderful adoption and the most amazing family full of love, but still it makes me think I'm not valid. I remember it was my 10th birthday and we were in a kind of moon-shaped alcove having afternoon tea. I remember bursting into tears. I remember Mum and Dad going, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And partly it was all of a sudden this light was shone on me. There was like imaginary fingers pointing at me. You were adopted. You were adopted. Was I worthy of that? And that's that sort of. It's almost like a lifelong imposter syndrome, isn't it? It's all like, am I who I really am?
Nicky's search for answers led him to finding and meeting his birth mother Stella in 1989. But for many, in the decades after adoption was legalised, accessing any records and information was nearly impossible.
If you could go back and speak to the lawmakers of the 1920s, what would you say to them?
I think erasing the past or disabling any knowledge of the past is a very detrimental thing, because you're haunted by who you might have been and where you came from. And I'm sure in the 1920s and 30s and beyond, a lot of children were never told that they were adopted. I feel very strongly about that. I feel strongly that there's a right to know.
She had a drive that she was doing the right thing. Now, looking back, was she doing the right thing? She was popularising something and gentrifying something that was taking children away from their families.
With adoption legalised, Clara Andrew could not have foreseen the problems that her work would later cause.
Mothers, many young, vulnerable and without support, were coerced, bullied or misled into feeling that they had no choice but to have their children taken away from them. The shame is not yours. The shame was never yours. The shame is ours. It is a stain on our history.
It was a system that started with the best of intentions, but would soon create a trail of victims.
Every time I come here, I get cold shivers going down my spine.
By 1944, Clara Andrew's vision and the national adoption process was in motion.
It's a wrench to part from your baby, but this mother has decided it would be better off with parents who can give it all the things she can't.
It gave many children a happy home when their future looked bleak.
Off they go, mother, father and new baby, to see how they're going to get on with each other.
But with the good, there were also mistakes, and those mistakes ruined lives. Up to 250,000 women were forced to put their babies up for adoption simply because they were unmarried. Women and girls were sent to institutions run by the church and state.
It sends shivers down your spine, to be quite honest. It's just memories just come flooding back, and they all hit you once.
In 1956, Lynn arrived 7 months pregnant at Rosemundy Mother and Baby Home in Cornwall.
What's it like for you walking back inside these four walls?
Terrible. As soon as I walked in today, I saw the passageway was slate. And no matter what state of pregnancy you were in, you had to scrub those floors. And I stepped on it, and as I stepped on it, so the shivers go up your spine. And it's just something that never leaves you. Just generally, you were their slaves. And if you didn't do it, You were penalised for it, and were you penalised?
In what sense?
You were locked in the room for a day, all this sort of thing. It was nice not to have to do work, so you thought, but they would bring work to you. They just lived a life of luxury, like lord and ladies in the manor, and you were their slaves.
You were made to go to church every Sunday?
Every Sunday, without fail. We were marched up the hill to the church. Before the service started, the vicar turned around and said, "We have the ladies from Rosamunde here today," so sarcastically. And when they were outside the church, that's when they started quietly calling you names. And we'd all come back down here crying our eyes out, because we were not sluts, we were not prostitutes. We'd done something that everybody else does, but for the grace of God go they. And it's absolute cruelty.
After 3 months of living at Rosamunde, Lynn gave birth to her son Mark.
6 weeks you had to stay here, look after him, knit things for him like baby clothes, blankets, and then go through the process of watching all the parents come to see the babies, but you didn't know which parent was having what baby. You were locked in the room again. You were allowed to look out the window. They used to walk around that big tree that's outside. The prams were all out there. And they'd go away. Like a few weeks later, some of them would come back, but you didn't know who was going to have what baby.
Many of the children born at Rosamunde were adopted, but for some babies, they were never given the chance.
I fear a Nigerian half-caste is almost impossible to find adoptees for. So sorry.
Phil Frampton was born at Rosamunde in 1953, but he was soon moved to Tapley Park in North Devon. At the time, the Christie family had turned part of the stately home into a children's home.
Phil, what does it mean to you to be back here at Tapley?
Oh, it's fantastic. First, I really enjoy this place now, whatever memory I might have had before, but also it's so much part of my story, sort of builds a bigger picture. It's strange feelings really, because if I wasn't black I wouldn't have been considered handicapped, and therefore I wouldn't have ended up here. And yet at the same time it's part of my history of growing up in orphanages, which were stately homes or former stately homes. They had so many fantastic grounds like here, and for children that's a treasure trove, because we were free.
Phil spent his childhood in orphanages and children's homes, and it's a childhood that he's proud of.
I never lost my parents in my conscious memory. I never lost anybody. In fact, through my childhood, I only gained. I was brought up in a children's world, and the staff were untrained, and that led to difficult issues. And generally actually speaking, I must say, we were neglected, but not by each other. We were left to our own devices in many ways, so we cared for each other. In the children's home, we were often told we were the lowest of the low. And in many ways, that's what we felt, very poor. I'm proud of us as kids and what we've achieved, yes? I'm proud of the fact that we had nothing and made something of it. I'm proud of my background. And from the age of 14, 15, I know that whatever mistakes I made were my own. I have no one else to blame. And I also know that every little success I made or whatever, that was my own too.
Phil, Lynn and countless others have long campaigned for an apology from both the government and the church for their involvement in forced adoptions and systemic failures.
Does an apology make any difference?
For me, yes, the apology is well overdue, well overdue. And it's really on their shame that they've allowed so many women to suffer.
And finally, in 2026, those apologies came.
To each and every one of those affected, we say a deep and heartfelt sorry.
Today we are saying that we are profoundly sorry and for our involvement in historic practices, and those practices were not acceptable, and it is a deep regret that this apology comes too late for some people.
Is an apology enough?
In a way, yes, it's satisfaction. It recognises the fact it happened, but in a way, no, because you were treated so cruelly and you've had to live with that for 70 years. I feel that sorry is a dirty 5-letter word to all these politicians and church people and this sort of thing that are concerned in it. It's just a dirty 5-letter word.
Although Lynn's anger is justified, the government says over the decades reforms have been made to the adoption process. And one person who understands the priorities and why the apologies were needed is the MP for Torbay, Steve Darling, who himself was adopted. In 1969, Steve was adopted by his parents Penny and Eric. 40 years later, Steve discovered some of his birth family lived only a few miles away from him in Devon.
Steve, what was it like for you having that reunion?
Well, it was a really positive experience for me. Since then, we've had Christmas dinner with my birth mother and my adoptive parents together. Sadly, my adoptive father, Eric, has died since. But we continue to see each other on a regular basis, and it's just enriched our lives. It's that nature-nurture experience that you're able to see play out in front of you, where you can discover that you have similarities to people who you've never actually lived with, but have, genetic attachment to.
Steve's personal experience has fed into his politics and his understanding, he says, of why the care system is struggling.
I think it all goes back to, sadly, broken Britain, and it's not broken Britain in a tabloid sense. It's the lack of finances for so many of our essential services where there is that cost of living crisis, and being able to open your home to a youngster, you need to have confidence that you're going to do that over a number of years. And with that cost of living crisis for many families now, it puts a big uncertainty on them, and they don't want to take that challenge on.
To get to this point, harsh lessons had to be learnt. Founded in 1739, Coram is the country's oldest and longest serving children's charity.
We need to remember that in the period before the 1970s, there was no contraception, and therefore many young women found themselves unmarried and with a baby to care for, and there was no welfare state or benefits infrastructure. Today there is, and we have learned things as a society. Adoption today is a service for children who cannot remain in their birth family of origin, no matter what. We have several thousand children who are approved every year for adoption, and we have far more of them waiting than we have adoptive families.
Another happy family leaves the office to start a new life together.
The adoption process is here to stay, but what needs to be done to encourage people to open their hearts and homes for the many children in need?
If you push it along, it's right on itself.
So this is Nanny and Grandad's garden.
Oh, it's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, the kids' favourite space, because my garden's pretty small. I've got artificial grass and a plastic fence, so it takes a lot of upkeep that I don't have to do.
Oh, you can't beat this. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's a blanket.
Living in Bristol, Hannah is mum to 2 children who she adopted from the same birth family.
I'd always loved children, and I just always didn't have that need for biological children. I didn't want to be pregnant. I was having a great life, and then suddenly I thought I do want children, and I just saw a leaflet for Adoption West, and it went from there. So I went to the information session and decided that was it. I was going to adopt children. There's kids out there that need, love, and so many that don't have it. And it just sort of broke my heart a bit, really. And then it all spiraled from there.
The Adoption Act of 2002 allowed, for the first time, same-sex, unmarried couples and single people to adopt, which meant Hannah was able to adopt on her own. In 2019, Hannah went through the rigorous adoption process, which involved training and references given by her friends, family and colleagues. But once she was approved in 2021, the process was surprisingly quick.
On the Friday I got my approval, and then my social worker called me on the Monday and said, there's a child we think you might be really suited to, would you like us to put you forward? On the Wednesday I got a phone call saying a baby girl's been born, but we need you to have an interview with, I think it was about 12 other group, and they were all couples, So I didn't think I stood a chance really. And then on the Friday I got a phone call saying, we've chosen you, we need her picked up probably at about 6 o'clock from the hospital.
I mean, that's a week.
Yeah, yeah, it was very fast. It was very fast. But I just didn't have time to think. I had my daughter in a carrier and walked into the house and my parents were there and they sort of stayed for a bit and then they left and that was it. It was just the two of us.
After nearly 3 years of mum life, Hannah's world was about to change again.
My children are 2 of 9 children. I got wind through the others that there was another baby coming and they've all got the same parents, birth parents. And I suddenly just thought, this is my chance, you know, if she's going to have a sister or brother, then I need to do it.
It's important to Hannah that her children's adoption journey is always part of their story.
They've got 7 siblings and we all meet up twice a year and it's fantastic because I get to ask questions of what they like when they were little and they're so similar. You know, the nature-nurture thing, I get to play out in real life. Every special occasion I think of their birth family, you know, that's the hardest part. You know, birthdays, you can't help but, you can't help but think about their birth parents. You know, and that bit is hard.
In the UK, up to 4,000 children are adopted every year. The circumstances around why a birth parent might put their child up for adoption are deeply personal and complex. For one woman, who we're calling Sophia to protect her identity, she felt she had no other option.
I found out later that from the start that adoption had been on the table. I didn't know anything until near enough the final court date where I did end up going and saying that I wasn't contesting it because I wanted him to have a better life than what I could give him at the time.
What was it like for you to say, you know what, I'm not going to contest this?
Devastating, because he was my boy. And I didn't want to give up on him. But I wasn't really given much of a choice.
Sophia grew up in a home with abusive drug addicts as parents. By the time she was 18, Sophia fell into an abusive relationship herself and became pregnant. Because her family were already flagged to social services, they were on her case.
The decision was made for me to go to a mother and baby unit with him, with a very prejudiced person. She was very prejudiced against people on benefits. Everything I did was wrong, to the point of she ended up saying to the guardian and all the social workers and everything that he was at risk of neglect from me.
Sophia spent 20 days at the unit, but she was suddenly turfed out one Christmas Eve. Over the next 6 months, she would only be allowed to see her son once a week in a contact centre, before he was eventually adopted.
How do you view the parents that adopted your son?
I'm really grateful to them because I know some birth parents get one letter and then don't get any more afterwards, but I've been really lucky. I've had one every year and I have done a card for his birthday every year. And with the letters, I know he's doing really well, and some of them sounds like he's taken after me with a lot of traits. Like, I'm very big in reading myself, and he apparently loves reading, and he's got a high reading age, which I did as well. So it's like, you think some things they take after birth parents so much, and then other things they pick up from the adoptive parents. So I'm just really grateful that they seem to love my boy.
Since 2011, Nikki Campbell has highlighted adoption through ITV's programme Long Lost Family, and has seen firsthand how the adoption process deeply impacts people's lives.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm okay.
What do you believe the lawmakers of today should be doing to better improve the system?
I'm very torn on that because this process needs to be speeded up, but the process needs to be rigorous. And so there's a contradiction there. Support, there needs to be support. So ultimately what it comes down to is people who know what they're doing and know what they're saying and understand the issue and the sector. And there are plenty of those that I've worked with. So it's about tapping the very best minds and expertise for their best practice and their good practice.
Over the decades, as the world has opened up, it's allowed a pathway for international adoption.
Hello. Come
How
on
are
in.
you? Thanks for having me.
Do come in.
While Andrea was working out in South Africa for a non-profit organisation, the children's home it was attached to closed over Christmas. Andrea was asked if she could look after Azile, and those 2 days turned into a lifetime.
So this is the first afternoon, and before we went home, we went to the beach, iconic one of Musenberg, where they have all the coloured beach huts.
Andrea and Azile have navigated life together, first in South Africa and then moving to the UK when Azile was 12. Have there been certain challenges that you've had to work through having a daughter with a different heritage?
Yeah, it's a learning curve. Some of it is the practicalities, hair care, skin care, you know, and that's very... it can be very politicised. You know, in trying to do the best thing for Azile, particularly when she was younger. Obviously now she makes her own decisions. If a child's been through the child protection system, they come with a lot of things that have happened that haven't been great. So navigating how to help a child understand what's happened, and one of the biggest questions is why? Why did that happen to me? Why is this happening? To maintain contact as far as possible with her birth family, birth community.
I never went to my birth mom's funeral, so I think going back to visit her grave, I think was really important for me to go and do that. Seeing all my aunts and uncles for the first time was also really cool, but it also definitely made me realise I've been raised a lot more differently than they have.
What has Azile done for you?
Well, she's turned my life upside down, but in the best possible way. If I hadn't become a parent, a mother, I think there'd have been a huge gap in my life, but I can't imagine being anybody else's parent but Azile.
But with a growing shortage of adopters, it means children are waiting longer to be placed with loving families. In England, the number of adoptions hit a new low at the end of 2025.
I fear that we're at a tipping point compared to when youngsters were adopted 40, 50 years ago. A lot of the youngsters now have really complex needs, and we've seen a step in the right direction to a certain extent by the government, but we need to go a longer way so there is funding for those adoptive parents and their youngsters over many years.
We probably have more staff on the ground than other regional adoption services. However, yes, I mean, we're absolutely stretched. We're dealing with crisis every day. You can't put people who are in crisis on a waiting list.
Since my adoption journey began in the 1990s, the world and reforms to the adoption process have changed. When I started out on this journey to learn about the women who made adoption possible, I never would have imagined how many people's lives would have changed, some for the good, others though in truly unimaginable ways. But for those working within the system now, what could be done better? Thank you. Hi everybody. Western Bay Adoption Service operates across South Wales. Yeah, very nice to meet you.
Hi, Beth. Nice to meet you.
I'm Mike. I think that adoption is changing. The children that come through to adoption now have often experienced early trauma, and that massively impacts on their development and the kind of parenting that they need.
These children that we see coming through now, because of increased in drug and alcohol misuse during pregnancy and other sort of complications, we see they have a lot more sort of needs and challenges. So we're offering services earlier on to try and make it so adopters are under our wings almost before those issues come about.
Beth and Mike have had a challenging time. They have one biological child, another fostered, and 2 adopted children. It's their son Jonah, who they adopted when he was 16 months old, who has struggled.
And most of our challenges has been with Jonah. They started almost as soon as we transitioned into our house, I think.
He didn't settle at all.
He didn't settle, it took a long time. It had a huge impact on our family dynamics. So we then had 3 unhappy children, which I think was really difficult. And I think we felt a bit of shame to ask for help. because our first adoption had gone well, our birth son, you know, everything had gone well, and then we had so much hope, I think, for our third son, and so much we wanted to do with him, and then he arrived and everything just fell apart quite quickly, I think.
It took Beth and Mike a couple of years to ask for support.
So they recognised very early with Jonah that he had a lot of anger, a lot of questions around his birth family, around what happened to him, around how he came to be placed with us. The social workers were amazing and they never questioned it. So I think the day we picked up the phone, they stepped in straight away.
We've had 10 years of hard slog. We almost broke down as a couple, and our relationship with Joe almost broke down as well. We were that close to giving him up.
We're working really hard to sort of change people's attitudes and to help people to understand that it should be an expectation and a norm to ask for support when you adopt a child. And if people haven't come to us earlier, then the problems tend to be bigger later.
How is Jonah doing now?
He is doing really, really well. So he's transitioned into mainstream school. He has established some friendship groups. I think, yeah, I get emotional, but he's starting his life now.
It's just a relief.
He's got a future now.
Yeah.
The government has undertaken a major consultation to reform adoption services. The Department for Education says it's increased funding so that adoptive families can access specialist support, and it's working to improve social care so that children can stay with their birth families where possible.
Every child must have a consistent and fair access to support across the country, and there is a huge variation of that access. So there is a really important moment for us, both governmentally and as a society, to invest in our children so that we have as responsive a system as possible. How to achieve that is where the challenge lies.
The government says it is committed to improving services for adopted children and their families. 100 years ago, one woman helped to legalise adoption.
She obviously used all the means that she had to try and influence, and she was adamant that she was doing the right thing.
I have met people whose lives have been changed by adoption.
When my son found me, he said to me, "You're the final piece in my jigsaw." He said, "You've actually made my life complete now."
We didn't get here by accident. We got here to where we are now because of the progress we've made.
I'm very grateful that I was adopted. But, you know, when I say I'm adopted, there's something which says I'm slightly different from you.
I often wonder how my life would have turned out had I not been adopted from Russia. Making this programme has made me realise how lucky I am to have been given the life I have now. But I know it's not the same for everyone. And making these connections has brought that into sharp focus. I wonder what Clara Andrew would have made of the process she set into motion 100 years ago. What do you think adoption has done for society?
I think it's helped because there are situations where it is needed. At least they'll have support from someone.
I think it has made us a much more loving and tolerant society, and there is a danger at the moment that our world becomes more intolerant. So the more we can support each other, it strengthens our society as a whole.
Don't get me wrong, I'd be more than happy if adoption wasn't the thing and no child had to be adopted, because you know, they'd be in loving homes, but sadly it's not the case. And I just think it's good to have a provision that kids are all loved and looked after.
Yes, mistakes have been made, but the adoption process has changed thousands of lives for the better, including mine. But let's be clear that the system does still need to change, because there will always be children in need of a loving home.